But you see, we are not here to discuss politics. Even though this was not a political discussion, rather thinking it into the next future. But we have to go on with our program. If you remember, last week we said that we began a new type of lectures. For a while we are going to put aside lectures about Jewish philosophy, and we will go into the biblical stories, talking about the Parashat of the week, but mostly in Halachic issues. We will raise from the portion of the week some Halachic issues, because someone asked to raise the level of the lectures. Let's see if you could take this one. If I was going to just lecture on halachot, on halachic matters, I would begin definitely with the laws of the morning. When we wake up in the morning, what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to wash our hands. That is if in my plan, if the plan was to start teaching you lectures on halakha, then the beginning should be regarding the washing of your hands in the morning, when you wake up. But it's not our plan. Our program is to go according to the parashiot, the portions of the Torah of the week, of every week. But since I already mentioned this, since also it is the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, the book of Jewish law, begins with the laws of Netilat Yadayim in the morning, washing your hands in the morning. So let me just, as symbolical as I can make it, let's talk for 1 minute about the washing of your hands. You know, the Jew is under tremendous obligations from the minute he wakes up in the morning till the time he goes to sleep. The first obligation of the Jew is when he wakes up is to say Modeh ani lefanecha, which means I thank you, O Lord, the living Lord, Melech Chai v'Kayam, she'achzarta bi nishmati, that you gave me back my soul. That's obligation number 1 of the Jew. If you never did it before, it's good to start doing it. It's in every book of the prayer. The beginning of the book of prayers is, that's the prayer that you say, Modeh ani lefanecha. And then, after this very short statement, begins another obligation, the obligation of washing your hands. You know that after a night's sleep, we have discussed this in the past, I remember, there is what we call ruach ra'ah, an evil spirit upon human beings when we go to sleep, especially after midnight. After midnight, let's say, when we are deeply asleep, sleep, as enjoyable as it is, you have to know that it is not life. Everybody will agree that to sleep is not life. I know everybody enjoys to sleep. Everybody wants to keep sleeping in the morning rather than going to shul, rather than waking up early. No, let me alone, I want to sleep. And sleep is very important, but when we talk philosophically about sleep, sleep is not life. In fact, I wish God gave us the possibility never to sleep. I mean, why did He create us as human beings who need the sleep to survive? You know, without sleep we cannot live. The Rambam says, Maimonides writes in his book, that if a person swears he will not eat for 1 week, he has to keep his promise, his swear, because it's possible. It's possible to survive without food for a week. But if one says, I swear I will not sleep for 3 days, it's not considered swearing. Why? Because it is something that is impossible. No human being can stay without sleep for 3 days. So we understand that God created sleep for His plans and purpose, and no matter how much we will try to explain, and the best explanation of course is to give a rest to the body, but we have to also touch a little bit the Kabbalah, what it says about it. In the Zohar, in the book of the Zohar, it says that when you go to sleep, there is a certain action that goes on. The body is put in a trance, but at the same time the soul now is in total function. It is free to depart the body. It goes out of the body to join her friends and to give a report for the days, for the deeds of the day in heaven. What does the body do at that time? He is deeply asleep. Moved by what? What gives him, he's still breathing. Well, he apparently, the power that is giving him the power to breathe is the nefesh, a lower level of soul. It's like electricity is how we have light. When you have no electricity, you use a generator or a candle. And that's the nefesh. She takes over the soul while the soul is busy going to heaven to give the report. Of course, it's up to you if you believe or not, but that's what it says in the Zohar HaKadosh. And that's perhaps according to the Kabbalah point of view, that's the reason why we have to sleep every night. Because at that time, God wants the soul to come to give the report. So if the soul is out of the body, what are you going to do? You have to sleep. But forget about Kabbalah. The main reason is because we need to rest. Because if you don't sleep, it's impossible. So what happens? So we arrive to the conclusion that sleep is something that is definitely the opposite of life. It's not life. And you know what happens when a person is dead? He is immediately a source of contamination. He is tameh. He's full of tumah when a person is dead. We are not considered like dead, but we are considered like 1/60th. Echad b'shishim mimita. The Gemara tells us that shena, sleep, is 1/60th of death. So death itself is a tremendous source of contamination. You cannot, if you touch the dead, you are immediately tameh. In the time of Bet HaMikdash, you will not be permitted to enter Bet HaMikdash until you do what has to be done after you are tameh, after you are impure. And how? Even by not touching the dead. It's enough only that the corpse is in a room, and you are in the same room with the corpse, you become tameh. Today it's not a big problem for us, because since the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, we are all considered tme'e metim. We are all considered impure, the highest level of impurity. That's the level of the dead. In the night, when we go to sleep, we are considered not dead, but 1/60th of death. That's sleep. If somebody asks you what is the definition of sleep in Jewish halacha or Kabbalah, you will say that's echad mishishim mimita. That's 1/60th of death. Which means, despite the fact that we are not as tameh, as dead, but we have a certain kind of contamination. And that contamination is accentuated, is exacerbated by the night itself. The night itself, when we are asleep, there is an evil spirit that hovers on the body of every human body. It usually is set and established on the hands, on the fingers. In fact, the Talmud, based on Kabbalah studies, gives it a name. This Ruach Ra'ah, this evil spirit, has a name. It's called Shivta Uvat Melech. It's a princess of a she-devil, a female devil, a Sheda. And she is very tme'ah. It's called, it has an evil spirit. When we wake up in the morning, the first thing that you have to do is go and wash your hands. And how do you wash your hands? You hold the vessel with your right hand, you fill it up with water, and then you give it to your left hand. And you pour the water on the right hand. Then you hold the vessel with the right hand, and you pour the water on the left hand. Now you hold again the vessel with the left hand, and you pour on the right hand. 3 times consecutively, you pour the water in such a way, and that's the way how our sages taught us to get rid of that extra contamination that we gather during the night. The Ruach Ra, the evil spirit that we call Shifta and Bat Melech. She is a queen. She is a princess. And yet she is a devil. And she is spiritual. And she comes and she glues itself. She attaches herself to our fingers. And we have to try to get rid of that. So what do? We pour the water first on the right hand. But she is very strong. She jumps immediately to the left hand. Of course we cannot see her, because there are many things that we cannot see in this world. And yet you go to the microscope, you could see things that you were not able to see before. So you cannot say it's not true what I'm saying, only because we don't see it, because there are many things that we cannot see. What about germs? Do we see them? Do you know how many germs we have in this room? Imagine if we had the possibility to see whatever there is in this room, we would die. So God limited the power of our sight so that we see only each other. We don't see much more than that. Small creatures that exist, we cannot see them. So the same thing also. When you have a power of tum'ah, of impurity, that we call, that even has a name, Shifta Ubat Melech. And she is very strong. The water is her enemy, because water is purity. And she is the chief of impurity. Now we have to attack her. So you pour the water on the right hand, and she is not eliminated. She jumps to the other. You pour on the left, she is weaker now, but she jumps again to the right. She is now weaker. She jumps again to the left. We pour again on the left. Now she is very, very weak, but she still has enough power to jump for the 3rd time on the right hand. And you pour the water on the right hand. For the last effort that she makes, she jumps again to the left. You pour on the left. After the 3rd time, she is vanquished. We get rid of her. You might say all this is baloney. How can we say anything? How can we not trust something just because we don't see it? That would not be fair. We have to trust our books. We have to trust what our sages say. We have to trust the Kabbalah. We have to trust the Halakha. They did not write so much just for nothing. It's impossible. Especially that they tell us a few things. They tell us that it is danger. You know that it's not good at all to touch your eyes in the morning before you wash them. Many infections happen in the body because we touch before we wash. In fact, there is a certain halachic question if we need to wash our hands in case you slept, you spent the whole night with gloves. You know, some tzaddikim, they used to do that in order to avoid, to a certain degree, the power of this contamination in the hands. They used to sleep with gloves. But I can't sleep with gloves. So when you wake up in the morning, you are full of tum'ah, of impurity. That impurity must immediately be removed by the pouring of the water. Otherwise, it could be affecting the body in many ways. It does affect the memory also. Do you know that tum'ah, impurity, affects the memory? You know that before, if you go to eat bagels, for example, I'm sure many people eat bagels in the morning. Well, you go, you bring them from the bakery, right? From the bagel store. You have to ask what kind of people work there in the morning. You know, they have many people who work very early in the morning, and you have to ask them. If they are Jews, they have to wash their hands. If the bagel is the property, if the bagel store is the property of somebody who is not religious, he might not pay attention to the fact that the workers must be washing their hands before they can handle the dough and everything that goes on with it. Otherwise, we eat things that might affect our health. You go to the doctors have no knowledge at all on this. How would they know? But one thing we can assure you, that many of the infections that we get is because of things like this. But if a person goes according to halakha, he will preserve himself from many kinds of affection. By the way, if the workers are non-Jewish, you don't have to worry. This is a direct psak of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who said that in case the workers are not Jewish, you don't have to bother them. Even though it's better that they should wash their hands because of cleanness, but since the non-Jews have no problems of purity and impurity, this is, by the way, a piece of information that you should know. Jews, they are bearers of impurity. When a Jew dies, the corpse of a Jew becomes a tremendous level of impurity, which a non-Jew, when he dies, it does not affect. Why is that? But do you trust me what I'm saying? I'm not here inventing a story. I'm telling you that Jews, when there is a corpse of a Jewish guy, it's tum'ah. It's terrible, the highest level of impurity. But the non-Jews, no problem. A little bit of impurity, but not much. If you want me to tell you why, I will tell you why. The problem is, are we going to believe that or not? The Jew has a soul. His soul is neshama kedosha, is a very, very holy soul. And because the Jew has a holy soul, when the soul departs the body of the Jew, immediately it is invaded by all the powers of Tumah. Because there is a rule in Kabbalah that any place that is filled with holiness, if the power of holiness goes away, it is immediately taken by powers of Tum'ah, the opposite of Kedusha, the opposite of holiness. There is a certain law, halakha, that says that the synagogue, for example, some synagogues, they had to close. There's no more Jews, and they closed. They have to be very careful not to enter a synagogue if it has been empty. If no one entered the synagogue for 6 months, be very careful, because it might have inside shedim and ruchot, spirits, evil spirits. And there are all kinds of stories in the Talmud about this. What happened? There is a certain famous synagogue in Iraq, in which Rav Sheshet, the revered great rabbi, who lived approximately 1700 years ago, he was blind, and he went into this synagogue, which was vacated long time ago, and it was full of shedim. You know what shedim? Evil spirits. And because he was blind, he did not see them, and they wanted to hurt him, they wanted to kill him. But because of his great power of Torah, he was able to scream at them, and they fled in terrible terror from the holy man. Let me give you an example as to how holiness could be a carrier of tremendous impurity, while it sounds the opposite. I mean, it's impossible. How can this is holiness? It's exactly the opposite of impurity. What am I talking about? Well, go to Israel, for example. Israel is the holy land, and because it is the holy land, that's where you will find the worst kind of Jews. And not only the worst kind of Jews, the worst kind of Arabs also. You know, the Arabs who live in the land of Israel are the most aggressive, at the same time the most modern. In other words, the air of Israel gives you chokhmah, gives you wisdom, but it could be also chokhmah of evil. Palestinians are very aggressive, very brutal. You know, the people of Azar, terrible. But one of the reasons is because they live in the Holy Land, or next to the Holy Land. So, Jews who are not religious in Israel are not only not religious, they also hate religion. They also hate the religious Jew. You cannot say no, because it's a fact. Why is that? In America, many people are not religious, but they don't hate the religious Jew. There is no hatred between religious or non-religious in America, not that much. But in Israel, it's dangerous to be religious. Unless if you live in a religious section of Jerusalem or other places, you are in danger. Why is that? I mean, this is the Holy Land. This is the place of religion. But because it is a place of religion, we have to be very careful, because it's holiness. If there is no holiness, immediately it is invaded by the power of Tum'ah. And that's how you get so many Chilonim, so many non-religious Jews there. The power of impurity that invades that place, which instead of being taken by the powers of holiness, it remained, it was vacated, it was empty of holiness, so therefore the power of Tum'ah went in. So the same thing also with the Jew. The Jew is holy, because his neshama is holy. Once you are born a Jew, you are a special kind of creation. You are not the same like other nations. I'm not saying that you are higher. All we know is that the neshama of the Jew is holiness. If it is kept in holiness, the Jew can become a tzaddik. If it is not kept in holiness, and rather permeated with all kinds of impurities, the Jew will become worse than a goy. You know, a non-religious Jew is usually worse than a goy. A goy can understand you. A non-religious Jew, there's nobody to talk to. You might disagree with me in a few points here and there. It's okay. But now let's go back to the body. The human body, when it is a Jewish corpse, when it is a Jewish body, it has contained, it has sheltered a very holy neshama, a power of an extraction of God Himself. When He died, the neshama left, and now the body has been invaded by the powers of Tum'ah. The goy is not moved by neshama, he is moved by nefesh. I don't know if you will agree with me in that. That's our emunah. That's what it says in our holy books.
But why would it invade the corpse? What is it going to do to the corpse?
No, I told you, this is not something easy to understand. A corpse, while it has life through the neshama, it is holy. It's not a corpse, it's a body. Yeah. Once the neshama departs, when the guy dies, then automatically it becomes tameh. Why? Because the powers of Tum'ah are always attracted to the place which had the power of Kedusha. What did I mean by telling you about Israel? Why is it that in Israel you find the worst kind of Jews? Because that's where you find the best kind of Jews. In Israel you find the holiest kind of Jews. If there is a tzaddik in Israel, you cannot compare with a tzaddik in America. A tzaddik in Israel, a righteous man in Israel, is a very holy man. So, in a place where it is full of kedusha, of holiness, it attracts tremendously the powers of impurity. Now, impurity doesn't have much power as long as there is holiness. But if the holiness departs, immediately the powers of impurity will go and grasp the place of holiness. I don't know if this subject is for us, but I'm just sharing with you this information as incomplete as it is. You should know, at least as a matter of belief, a Jewish body is a body which has, as long when it is alive, it is holy, because of Brit Milah, because of many things. But once the neshama goes, because the guy dies, then automatically that place becomes an attractive place for the powers of impurity. The goy never had a neshama, he had a nefesh. That is something else. And that's why when he dies, the body does not attract very much the powers of tum'ah, and therefore a goyish body does not make you tummy so much. Maybe to a certain degree something. That's already something of discussion. Now, that's why I said if you go to a bagel store, it's preferable to find in there non-Jewish workers. Because in case, usually today everybody washes his hands. But let's say they don't wash their hands, it's not so bad. But if he has Jewish workers in that bakery, and the bakery is not in the hands of a religious man, and he doesn't care about asking his workers if they wash their hands, you have to be very careful. You have to ask. Did you wash your hands? If you didn't wash your hands, if they don't wash their hands, do not buy bagels from there, because these bagels will be dangerous, risky for our health. So now, do we understand after this long message, as incomplete as it is, do we understand the necessity of washing our hands in the morning? We understand that you have to wash your hands in the morning. Now, you wash your hands in the way that I have prescribed before. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And why is that? Again, because the power of Tum'ah that we call it, she is a female devil. She has great power, and the water is its enemy. When you pour it on the right hand, she jumps to the left, and then she jumps to the right until her power completely is attenuated, and then you are okay.
Why are we using kli?
The kli, our sages said it, we have to use koach gavra. Koach gavra, by the way, if let's say you are in a place where there is no kli, there is no vessel, what you have to do is, you have to pour on your hands and pour on the other with your hands. That is done only bedi'avad, in case you have no keli, because it's not good. How much can you carry? How much water can you carry? So by carrying the water in a kli, you know that there is a certain measure of water that you are pouring. And that's more beneficial than doing it with your hands. That's called in the language of Halachic, koach gavra, the power of the man, of the person who carries. It's enough as an explanation. I know it is incomplete because it's not easy to explain all the way. But that's the only explanation that I can give you regarding why the vessel. And it has to be with the vessel. Otherwise, it's not kosher. Alright? As I have explained before, it's a matter of power. So the power is only when you are holding it with your hands. So we understand now the necessity of washing our hands in the morning. Very, very important. Very important. If you go to your work without washing your hands, you are in trouble. How can you touch your eyes? What about your nose? You know how many times people have all kinds of things in their nose, especially if he has allergies like me in the nose, and you have to touch here and there. If they are not washed, that is a cause for infections, all kinds of eruptions. You know? If you are worried about the skin of your face, make sure you wash your hands every time you go after you wake up from any kind of sleep. There is a question in the halakha, the poskim are asking, is there ruach ra'ah, is the evil spirit that we explained to you before, does it exist also when you go in the afternoon, when you sleep in the afternoon? So this is a machloket. Some say yes, some say no. But all of them agree that in the day, if you sleep in the day, the ruach ra'ah, the evil spirit, is not very strong. But still, the halakha is that even if you sleep one hour or something during the day, you wake up, you have to wash your hands 3 times in such a way. By the way, even if you go to the bathroom, when you go to the bathroom, what is our obligation as soon as we finish with the bathroom? Whether it is for small or big. You know what I mean? You have to wash your hands. Exactly the same way we wash as I have described before when you wake up in the morning. Exactly. Why? Because it's the same reason. You know that the bathroom is a place of tum'ah. And I'm going to tell you a little information. Again, I don't know if you will believe me or not. You know, in the bathroom, you are not allowed to talk. Let's say your wife tells you, "Hey, what time is it?" And you are in the bathroom. You should answer her by going like this. That's all. But why? Why can't you formulate words? Why can't you verbalize phrases in the bathroom? So our sages say, and I'm closing my eyes before I tell you, that there is a shed, there is a devil that sits all the time in the bathroom. And he moves only when he hears voices. He's blind. He doesn't see. But when he feels a presence, he could affect. Therefore, not to talk. And he moves only by when he hears a phrase or a letter, a distinct letter. But if he hears only a sound, like there is a specific story in the Talmud in Masechet Brachot, where we find that the rabbi went into the bathroom, and that bathroom was a public bathroom, and before he went in, so he didn't know whether there is someone there already or not. Another rabbi was there, and he went and he emitted sounds. He went like this. This way he knows that somebody is there. It's not that he heard somebody, "Hey, I'm sorry, get out of here, I'm here." He didn't hear such a thing. All he heard was, Why is that? Because there is a devil there. And the devil there doesn't, when he hears, he knows there is a presence and he might just attack. How does a devil attack? It's not something that we understand. It's not that something is coming to attack you, or that you will feel a punch, or that you will feel something. No. It has to do with tum'ah. Devils are powers of tum'ah, of contamination, of impurity. Impurity affects us every day. You know that, my friends? And one of the affectations is loss of memory. Many times when we don't remember, we think it's only because we forgot. No, it's possible because you were in a bathroom. Maybe you visited somebody in the hospital and next to him somebody was dead. All kinds of reasons. But that's not the only affectation. We could also get an infection of some kind because of tum'ah. Nothing is clear about it. We go to the doctor will tell you because you have a virus, because you have this, you have that. And when we go to heaven after 120, we will discover that it was not a virus. In fact, the virus itself was because of some kind of tum'ah, of contamination that I am talking about. And that's the reason why Jews, since time immemorial, they are the hand washers. People who wash all the time. They wash their body, they go to mikveh, they wash themselves every day, the face. The only thing is that we are not obligated to wash except once a week before Shabbat is the feet. In fact, there is such a thing that some people wash even their feet in the morning, but it's not an obligation. Why is that? Because the amount of tum'ah, of contamination that resides in the feet or on the feet is impossible to remove. Since it's impossible to remove, we don't even bother remove it. Shabbat, the Kedusha of Shabbat, the holiness of Shabbat, counterattacks the power of impurity and it wins. That's why by washing the feet Erev Shabbat, we are okay. Because together with the holiness of Shabbat, we can overcome the impurity of the feet. But every day, even if you wash them 1,000,000 times, it's not going to work. So, wash them just a little. I mean, it's always good to wash. Why not? But the hands is a place where the devil rests. In the morning, when you wake up, he goes right there and you have to wash him away. Wash it away. So, we have to wash. Jews have to wash when they wake up. Jews have to wash when they they went into the bathroom. You know that according to halakha, I'm going to tell you again another thing, I don't know if you know it. How many times it happens to you that you went in the bathroom just to see if you have some soap or if you take a box of tissues or something? Having in mind nothing, I mean, you are not going to stay there, not even for small reason. Going there, and do you know that as soon as you enter the bathroom, when you come out you have to wash your hands? Is it too much to ask? If you are...
Also with kli? Or?
Oh, yes, with kli. Every time with kli. Every time. There is never washing without a vessel. Always with a vessel. Unless if you cannot find a vessel.
But in the morning you do it once and once.
Oh yes. Oh, yeah. When it is a matter of impurity, every time it is a matter of impurity because it is a bathroom or because you moved your things, your bowels or whatever it is, it's a matter of impurity. The impurity is there. The way to wash it away is the 3 times as we have explained before. There is another time when we wash our hands. Tell me. Netilat yadayim. I know it, always netilat yadayim, but for food. That's already not necessarily because of impurity. That's because is commemorating what the Kohanim in the time of Bet HaMikdash, they washed their hands always before they entered Bet HaMikdash. Before they started the work, I mean the service of the temple. So that's why we have to wash, because the shulchan, the table upon which we eat, is similar to the mizbeach, to the altar upon which they put the sacrifices and they burn the sacrifices. And in order to remind us of that, that's why we are told, since we are a holy nation, we wash our hands before we eat. That requires a beracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, al netilat yadayim. By the way, if it is in the afternoon, and you go to the bathroom and you come out, there is a blessing for Asher Yatzar, but there is no blessing of netilat yadayim. Netilat yadayim of the impurity is only once in the morning when you wake up. That when you go to the synagogue and you say Brachot HaShachar, then you have to say Al Netilat Yadayim for that. So the official blessing of Netilat Yadayim is only when we go to eat bread. When you eat bread, you have to wash your hands to say Al Netilat Yadayim, and then I'm motzian this. But coming back and finishing with it, the obligation of washing our hands in the morning is extraordinary obligation. It is something that every Jew must be aware, and never hesitate to wash your hands every time you need it. We wash our hands before we go to the synagogue in Shachrit. We wash our hands before we go to the synagogue on Mincha. We wash our hands before Arvit. Every time you enter the synagogue, it's good to wash your hands, because maybe you touch something that is not, and it's not good to come to a place where there is holiness with impurity. So that's as far as I can regarding this question of washing our hands. In order to fulfill our obligation of the day, let us now go to complete at least some halachic issues regarding last week's parasha, Bereshit. Okay? In last week's parasha, after we discussed, if you remember, the creation, we discussed Adam and Chava. Remember? When God created man, when God created all the living creatures in the world, so the Torah says, "Vayomer Elokim totzeh haaretz nefesh chaya lemina." Let the land bring forth every living creature, every living soul, nefesh chaya. Instead of using the term living creature, he said living soul of every creature, lemina. That's how Hashem says, that's how he created life. Not Adam, but that's how he created all life in the world except the human life, just by proclaiming a commandment. He gave a command, Totzi haaretz, let the land bring forth nefesh chaya lemina, a living soul of every kind of creature. Now, we know that it says soul, but I did tell you before that there is nefesh and there is neshama. In English you have only one word, the soul. But there is soul that we call neshama, and there is a soul that is nefesh. Nefesh is more animalistic, whereas neshama is for a human being. Animals do not have a neshama, they have a nefesh. It's a lower level of a soul. Now, here is a very interesting halachic question that I am sure you will like to discuss. You know, many times women get pregnant and then unfortunately they lose the child, second month, third month, they miscarry. It's a fetus that left the body and it's dead. It has a shape many times. Sometimes it doesn't have a shape. What's happening with those souls that come in such a form and they go and they die? Do they have maybe olam haba? Isn't this a good question? Because a soul is a soul. It is a soul that was in the womb of the mother for a month or two and then died, miscarried. It's still a soul. It has to go back because we believe that God gave that soul to finish her tikkun. Whatever was left from a previous life, maybe a little bit was left to be completed by coming to this, to breathe the air of the womb of the mother and not having to be born normally. So now, okay, so that soul was alive. When it goes back, where does it go? Does it go to olam haba? Which means the question is, are fetuses that are miscarried, do they also have a share in the world to come? Do they go to heaven? Apparently we find in the Gemara in Masechet Nida on page 22 the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and he says that even a fetus, even a 2 weeks fetus, is known as nefesh chaya. That's the reason why in the Torah God says, let every nefesh chaya, every living soul, lemina, all kinds. So Rabbi Meir says this sentence includes also those living souls that came for only 1 second. So he says, yes, according to Rabbi Meir, yes, he has olam haba. So now we find a similar question in Masechet Sanhedrin on page 110. Katan me'ematai ba le'olam haba. I mean, a child or a baby. When does he go to olam haba? I mean, do you have to be grown up to do mitzvot in order to go to olam haba? Or even when you are in a state of childhood, or maybe babyhood, or even before? We have the opinion of Ravina in the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin, who says, Misha'a shenizra. From the minute the sperm was injected into the womb of the mother and it has been planted, all it needs is 3 days in the womb of the mother. From that minute, that soul is already liable for olam haba. If she does not succeed to come to this world, that's okay, she goes to heaven. On the contrary, she goes in a very great state of purity to heaven. What about tchiyat hametim? I mean, people who died in such a way. And we believe that one day after the Mashiach comes, 4 years after the Mashiach comes, there will be what we call the resurrection of the dead. And by the way, you have to believe in that, because if you pray 3 times a day, Baruch atah Hashem mechaya hametim. We bless God for giving us the power of resurrection. And we believe there is going to be a resurrection, which is the perfection of the soul and the body, the reunion of the body and the soul together. So what about a person, I mean a soul that has been miscarried and will he be revived again during the resurrection of the dead or not? So now we understand, according to the Gemara that we have mentioned, especially in the Talmud Yerushalmi in Masechet Shvi'it, Gam litchiyat hametim. Not only this fetus who did not succeed to come to this world, but died in the womb of his mother, he will not only he will have a share in the world to come, but he will also get up during the resurrection of the dead. And who are they? Even, as much as from the time when he was injected into the womb of his mother. So those are things that our sages took the responsibility of telling us. Would you like me to tackle another question? Halachic question? This is only an example of one halachic question that is from the portion of the Torah. If you wish to use another 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we can go for another question. Again, from the Torah of last week, Bereshit. It has to do with what we started, the question regarding the washing of the hands. This lecture of tonight does have to do with that, and it has to do with Bereshit. Because you have to understand that in the creation, when God created everything, before Shabbat, He was in the midst of completing a certain creation, and Shabbat came, and He could not complete it completely. And that's how we get the devils, the powers, the devilish powers, the shedim, the demons. The demons also are a creation. And why we cannot see them? Because they are something that was beginning to be created, but their creation was not completed, because Shabbat arrived. At that time, because they were left incomplete, that's how we have the demons, shedim and ruhot, evil spirits, those things that cause us the evil spirit of the night for which we have to wash our hands and everything in the morning. At the end of the creation, of the story of the creation, God created Adam and Chava. So He created men and women. And then on the 5th day, God says, "Vayvarech otam Elokim, vayomer lahem pru urvu." And God blessed both of them, and He said to them, "Go ahead and procreate. Make children." That's what the Torah last week tells us. Halachic question. Should we understand from this verse that women also are under the obligation to make children, or only men? Did you understand the question? According to Halakha, every Jew must fulfill the mitzvah of Pirya Verivya, procreation, which means bringing children. In the Halakha, there is a certain discussion as to how many children you have to bring to fulfill this mitzvah. Not to stop bringing children, but to fulfill the mitzvah of procreation. Does it mean that you have to bring only one child, or 2 or 3? What? There is a discussion in the Halakha. There's one opinion that says 1 boy and 1 girl, then you have fulfilled the mitzvah, which does not mean to stop, because life must go on and you have to keep bringing children, as many as you can. But the fulfillment of the mitzvah is by bringing 1 boy and 1 girl, and the opinion of the Gra of Vilna, Agrami Vilna, is 2 boys and 2 girls. So which means if you brought only girls, you did not really fulfill the mitzvah of procreation. Okay, it's not in your hands, it's not in your hands. What about people who cannot bring children also? There are many people who could not bring any children. So they did not fulfill the mitzvah of procreation, but they are not going to be punished or for it. For what? On the contrary. Now my question is, since in the pasuk, in the verse of the Torah, when God created Adam and Eve, He said, "Vayvarech otam Elokim," God blessed them, and He says, "Pru urvu." Anybody knows Hebrew here?
Yes.
You know Hebrew. So pru is the plural or singular? Plural, right? That's pru urv. That means he's talking the pasuk. The Torah is talking to both. Apparently, we understand from this that both of them are under the same obligation, which means a man must get married for the purpose to bring children, and a woman must get married for the purpose to bring children. Now the question is that so? Are women also obligated to bring children or not? Of course, if you ask a woman, do you want children? She will say, of course I want children. But I'm saying, is she obligated by Jewish law to bring children or not? So apparently from this pasuk we understand, since God is speaking to both of them pro urvu, which means procreate, it means that both of them are under the same obligation. But you will be very surprised that the halacha is not this way. The Talmud in Masechet Yevamot on page 65. There is a specific halacha there which has been established in the Shulchan Aruch as follows: Ha'ish metzuveh al pirya verivya velo ha'isha. It is the man who is under the obligation to make children. The woman is not under the obligation. There is in the same Gemara an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka that the obligation falls on both of them, but it has not been accepted. The obligation is only upon the men. So what would be the question then? You should be asking me the question. So how come? Very good. How come the Torah is speaking to both and commanding them, prurvu, procreate? That means both of them, men and women, must.
Without the woman.
You're saying something that has been said by one of the commentators. I will explain. So now the question is, if the halakha decided already that the obligation is the men's only, not women are not under the obligation. And by the way, let me tell you something. I don't know if I can say it. I could say it in this forum. Yes, sometimes, a man is not allowed to stop, by the way. He has to bring children as many times as he can. And sometimes the woman is not feeling so well and she doesn't want. And she's very religious and she's not going to tell the husband to do what is not supposed to be done. So sometimes she uses means, a pill or something. We don't give permission for those things. But let's say she has no choice. The doctor said to her, you must. So what we tell her is, go ahead, do it, but don't tell your husband. Let's keep it in secret as much as possible. Why? Because the husband is under the obligation to bring children, but you are not under the obligation, and therefore you could hide it from him. That's the halachic view on this very delicate matter. But now let's ask the question again. Since we said that the Torah is talking to both of them, procreate, and now you tell me that the halakha is that only the men, not the women, how can we explain then the commandment that talks to both of them? Pru urvu, he didn't say pere urve. He says pru urvu, which means he's talking about both of them. So we are going to learn a few things that will explain this question. We have first the explanation of Rabbi Il'a in the Talmud. Rabbi Il'a, the Talmud of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He says, Amar kra umil'u et haaretz v'chivshuha, ish darko lichbosh ve'en isha darkah lichbosh. This Rabbi says, because the Torah does say that God tells them, go and procreate and rule the world. So this Rabbi comes to his conclusion, and since the man is the one who rules, who conquers, who fights with a sword and makes battle, that's why the commandment is upon him. The woman, it's not her job to go and take the sword and fight and conquer. Therefore, this does not apply to her. So therefore the halakha has accepted that the woman is not under the obligation. The only question is why? Again, why? Why isn't she under the obligation to bring children? When she is made for children. God created her to bring children. And yet she doesn't have the obligation to bring children. We have the explanation of the Or Sameach, a great, almost contemporary rabbi, Rabbi Meir Simcha HaKohen, who lived in 1920 in Germany. And he has, his book is known in all the yeshivot. In every yeshiva they learn his classic Or Sameach, his commentary on the Rambam. And he explains, מפני שאישה היא המסתכנת בלידה, והתרת דרכיה דרכי נועם. Who takes the risk of bringing children? Who has to go through the hospital and the pain and the labor and even the danger? In old times many women died during labor. So it is the woman who takes that risk. Because she is the one who is in danger. The Torah, whose ways are always sweet and comfortable, Derachea darchei noam, like we sing, Derachea darchei noam, vechol netivoteha shalom. You know this. Derachea darchei noam. The ways of the Torah are ways of sweetness. And therefore the Torah cannot command the woman, hey, procreate, with a commandment. How can you command anybody when you know he is going to put himself in danger in order to fulfill that commandment? That's the reason why, according to the Or Sameach, the woman is not commanded to bring children. It is the man who is commanded. Why? Because the risk is hers. It would be unfair to make it a commandment. Yes.
Does this mean that the woman is not obligated to get married?
That's the point. That's exactly the point I am going to reach here. That means that the woman is not under the obligation to get married. So what's going on? Are we going to tell women not to get married? What's going on? The answer is, our sages already declared in the Masechet Kiddushin, in the beginning of the second chapter, Tav lemetav tandu milemetav armelo. The woman by nature, God created a special nature in the woman. She doesn't like to be alone. She wants to be with two rather than to be with one herself. Tav lemetav tov lashevet tandu im shnayim milemetav armelo. Milashevet almana. She wants to be with two rather than to be with one. That's the nature that Hashem. That's the reason why a woman wants to get married. We are going to find out a little more about this subject to give us another picture of that discussion. But in the meantime, she has no obligation to get married. If she doesn't want to marry, she doesn't get a sin. There is no sin. We are going to find out that there is a ran. Rabbeinu Nisim, in one of his responses, in his tshuvot, in chapter 32, that he says, "Shemikol makom mitzvah ka'avda." He says, even though she is not obligated by the law to get married and to bring children, but if she does so, she has a mitzvah. Again, if she doesn't have to, but if she does, she has a mitzvah. Which means God gives her a reward for wanting to bring children and to get married, when in fact it's not her obligation. But a woman by nature, when we talk about nature of course wants the woman to get married. How else? You understand? Yes.
Does this mean she's doing a favor to a man, or what?
That what?
It's like doing a favor to a man, right?
Why would you say it this way? Why would you say to do a favor?
Because he's the one who is obligated to get married.
That is true. But since we said already that in her nature she doesn't like to be by herself, there is no question about it that she's also doing a favor to herself. Not only that, there is another reason why. In fact, I don't want to extend too much this subject, but let me conclude with this. The Or Sameach, which I mentioned before, that Rabbi Meir Simcha Cohen who said this. By the way, he is the one who gave the prediction that I did tell you once. In 1920, he wrote in his book Meshech Chochmah, a great classic on the Torah, and he wrote that in 1920 he wrote this, that there is going to be a terrible event that will start from Berlin. He is the first one who predicted the Holocaust. And you could read it if we have here a Meshech Chochmah. I don't know if I can find it, but in my house I can find it, and I will read it. That he said it 1920. That's 20 years before the Holocaust, and he wrote about it. And he says, "From Berlin is coming a wave of terrible destruction to our people," and so forth and so forth. So he is the one who says that because the woman is the one in danger when she is giving birth, that's why the Torah does not obligate her. Does not make it as an obligation for her to do it. But he says, he adds something else. That all this is only after the sin of Adam. After the sin of Adam, then the obligation is no more upon the woman. Because after Adam, after the sin of Adam, that's when, and Chava, one of the curses that God gave to Chava is that Be'etzef tel dibanim, you shall suffer when you bring children, right? And that's why she is not under the obligation, which means he says before the sin of Adam, Chava definitely was under the obligation to bring children, because she would bring children without any danger. And automatically we will be able to understand why the Torah commanded them, both of them, in the form of pru'urvu, both of them. When? Before the sin of Adam. But after the sin of Adam, you cannot anymore obligate the woman, because she is the one who suffers. But at the same time, we are saying that there is another explanation by the Levush in Even Ha'ezer in chapter 1, when he says the reason why God, if God does not mean the obligation to be upon both of them, why did he use in the Torah the term of the plural, pru'urvu, which we already answered before, but it's still, the Torah is forever, and now you tell me it's only before the sin of Adam, and after the sin of Adam this has changed. The Torah is eternal, it cannot be just for one time only. So therefore the Levush, a very ancient, great halachist, he says that the reason why the Torah puts the commandment on both of them, it's not to tell me that the woman is also obligated. Only because nature is that can you bring children without a woman? He says. So since it's the woman that brings children, that makes them, so that's why the Torah refers to both of them. But the obligation really is upon the man, not upon her. Only because she is the one who makes the man, who brings him in her womb, that's why the Torah refers to both of them. That's what the Levush explains. So as I said before, the Ran says anyway it's a great mitzvah for her to get married, but it's not a sin if she doesn't. It's a great revelation. By the way, the Rama, Rabbi Moshe Iserlash, who lived 400 years in the time of in the time of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch. He lived in Krakow. So he writes in the book, in the volume of Even Ha'ezer, in paragraph 13, he adds the words, בכל זאת תשתדל האישה להינשא, כדי שלא תעמוד בלא איש משום חשדה. He says, even though she is not under the obligation to get married, but she must do her best to get married. Why? Because a woman, if she is not married, if she is by herself, willingly, people will suspect her of illicit behavior, of all kinds of behavior that is not moral. You understand? So she has to, if she is trying and she couldn't, that's something else. But she must try to become married. Why? Not because of the obligation to make children, but because to appear always fine in the eyes of people. Otherwise people will suspect her that she is free to do whatever she wants. You understand? So this, by the way, teaches us that even a widow must do her best to get married. Even though it's not an obligation of the Torah, but it's better that she gets married for the purpose not to be suspected to remain by herself all the time. Let me conclude with this point. Is there an exception to all these rules in which we find that the woman is not even obligated to get married, to try to get married? There is one case. So again, let's conclude. She is not under the obligation to get married. But by nature, God gave her a nature to want to get married. At the same time, if she gets married, she has a mitzvah. If she does not get married, she doesn't have a sin. However, since the Mefarshim say that she has to try in order not to be suspected, we understand that even a widow must also try to be married. I mean, even though she already was married before, but she should try not to stay by herself. So now, is there a woman that has absolutely no obligation, that not only that, she should not get married? There is one exception. And this exception is brought in a book called Sefer Parnas, in chapter 125. מי שנהרג על קידוש השם, אשתו לא תינשא, משום כבוד שמיים או משום כבודו. There's only one exception. If a man died the death of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of God. How do we sanctify the name of? Let's say he's a Jew, and they came and threatened him, if you don't eat pork in the eyes of 10 other people, if you don't eat pork, I'll kill you. And he, of course, he should eat, by the way. Nobody should give his life for pork. But let's say they tell him to worship an idol, or to kill somebody else. Then he preferred to die al Kiddush Hashem. He died sanctifying the name of God. Let's say they tell him either go to become a Christian or you die. Many Jews prefer to die than to become Christians. You know, in 1492, many Jews prefer to go to be thrown in the fire rather than anybody who died for the sake of Judaism is considered to have fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. He sanctified the name of God. If a man like this dies and he leaves a wife, this wife should not get married. Because if she gets married, she is going to desecrate the memory of her husband, at the same time the effect of the sanctification of the name of Hashem. By staying unmarried, she is keeping the flame of the great deed of her husband who died for the sake of God. There are other questions, very interesting halachic questions in this domain that I prepared. What about a woman who is married but her husband cannot make children, he cannot bring children? What is she supposed to be? The first question is she supposed to leave him? We understand she is not under the obligation to leave him because, as we said before, she is not under the obligation to make children. She wants children, but he cannot. What can we do? Should she leave? She doesn't have to leave. But if she wants to leave him, are we supposed, the Beit Din, are we supposed to force him to give her a divorce or not? And that's the next question, but it's already late. So perhaps next week we will discuss it. And by the way, yes, we force him to do it, and to give her also, to pay her her ktubah. You understand? Because she can always say that I need a child upon who will support me in my old age. Based on that, the Beit Din is supposed to even force him to give her a divorce. This is still bring other discussions, but we will conclude the lecture of tonight, which has been interestingly, it started with Netilat Yadayim, and it brought us to other issues in Halacha. So that's another part of halachic issues from the portion of the Torah. But we are still in Bereshit. Keep this in mind, Rachmin. So have a beautiful night. And Obama or not, well, whatever is written is written.
We'll survive.
So I hope we will survive.
I have a question.
Yes, dear.
I read many times that the tzaddikim slept 20 minutes and they would not sleep longer. Is it for any reason, or do I...
Very good question. In fact, I will answer by citing the most famous issue on this, King David. The Talmud says in Masechet Sukkah that King David never slept more than half hour. It's half hour, not 20 minutes.
Okay.
It has to do with the psak of the Mishnah Brura, who says that it takes us about half hour to fall into that kind of sleep that we call death. Before that, it's only trying to, it's not complete. You understand? So it's about half hour. It goes according to 60 times breathing of a horse. Shitin nishmin. 60 respirations of a horse. That's the time that is required to bring the Ruach Ra. King David, our sages said that he never slept more than half hour. Why? Because he calculated that after half hour he will be dead. He didn't want to taste the taste of death. He wanted his body to be always above that, and that's why he did not allow himself to sleep more than that. They say that even 250 years ago, the Vilna Gaon did not sleep. He slept also 3 times a day, every time 1/2 hour. And that's all he slept. And this has been, by the way, certified by witnesses who used to go on a ladder to watch him all day and night studying. As the famous Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna.
And the second question, about the bathroom doors, because they build right in the middle of the house, no matter what, religious or not religious people, the doors should be closed all the time.
Yes.
That's so.
That is definitely suggestible.
Because once I heard that if the bathrooms are not of the way they used to be, that they are different, that's okay.
Even in old times there had to be some kind of partition. But it is true that there were outside in the field some places where people had to do their things in the fields, and no partitions. What can you do? I remember when we went to camp, when I was still the only thing that they gave us a place where you could just dump it there. And there was no partition, there was no wall. Of course, it is definitely advisable. Even in the Talmud, Masechet Berachot, we find the building of how to build a bathroom. You have to build it in a way that is situated in a way that does not face, by the way, Jerusalem nor the east. So when you start building a house, you have to have in mind those things. If possible. Today we don't pay attention too much to those things, but this has been discussed in the Talmud. Azman alav miltahi. It's a sugya that is known. The bathroom should be always closed if possible. In case it's open, it's not so terrible. The main thing is not to go inside the room without washing your hands. So you have learned something new tonight, that you went in the bathroom, even to pick up a tissue, you have to wash your hands.
Thank you.
Okay, my friends. Do you want to go to that kind of level of discussion, or we should go just to discuss philosophy and things like we used to do?
It's interesting.
Halakha. Okay, halakha is
What was your question?
will teach you many
I wanted to
things.
ask something, but it doesn't have nothing to do with this.
Okay, let's see.
It happened a couple of months ago in Austria. A woman, she has 3 highly religious sons. One of her sons were home with her, so she went to take a shower. And suddenly she fainted, and one of her son heard her faint. He knocked on the door, he kept calling her, she didn't answer. Then
So
he called 911.
Yes.
Because he didn't want to break in, he didn't want to see his mom naked. And it took like 20 minutes for the emergency to arrive, and she was dead.
He made a big mistake. He should
People are
have gone
blaming
in.
him. They said that he should have.
He should have
broke
gone in
So what,
with a towel of some kind, going like this, putting it on her, and that's it. You know, this is the same story that we had with
so he
Noah.
made a mistake.
With a Noah.
With Noah. "Vayaged lishnei achav bachutz." So when they came with a veil all the way, and then they covered him. So, especially in matters of emergency, when time is very important, so of course he should have pushed the door and go in. If he had already a logical time to think that there is some kind of danger, and she does not answer. You understand? Okay, so what can we do? That's what he thought best to do. That's what he thought best to do. Was there any problem later? I mean, they were able to save her?
She died.
She
was
died.
dead. Yeah, she was dead. And now people are blaming him. They say,
yeah,
why
yeah.
didn't you break in? He says, because
He should have.
I'm not allowed to see my mom naked.
He was wrong. He was wrong. He should have known better. But how much can you blame him, the poor guy? Because anyway, but the doctors were, I'm sure, are competent enough to know when was the time of
I
death.
don't know when she died exactly. I just know she fainted, and
They
by
could-
the time
they
they
could
came,
find.
she was dead. And he was sitting there
Most
bleeding.
unfortunate. Unfortunately, they shouldn't blame him that much, but he should have known better. Who knows how much time? Who knows? Maybe he could have saved. I don't know. But definitely, he should have known that he can go, and the maximum, as I said, to take a cover of some kind.
Yeah, law. It's part of the law.